The first time Lila Reyes took the stage with Whippoorwill Riot, she didn't hear the roar of the 50,000 fans in the stadium. She felt it through floorboards that trembled like unbridled horses and in the bass waves that surged through her ribcage. She planted her boots shoulder-width apart, inhaled the warm scent of fog machines and pyrotechnics, and let her hands rise the way she had practiced in her apartment mirror 1,000 times. Tonight, she was interpreting Cracked Horizon, the band's biggest single. While the drummer clicked sticks to count the band in, Lila conjured the lyrics in her mind. Volcanic images, tornado verbs, a hook that modulated unexpectedly, then translated them into American Sign Language that was equal parts grammar and dance. The singer, Tess McCann, launched into the first verse. The guitarist's distortion soaked the night air purple, and Lila's fingers flicked embers. Her shoulders became cliff edges. Her eyes flashed with lightning that matched the graphic on the song's lyric video playing behind her. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Jonah Keene, the band's lyricist, lingering behind a speaker stack, chewing his lower lip. He bobbed his head in time, but didn't sing along. His lips moved in a silent recitation, as if he were giving himself a pep talk. He always lurked there during shows, partially hidden, which Lila had originally assumed was a writer's habit, observing, analyzing, making mental notes. Only later had she learned the truth, that the man responsible for Whippoorwill Riot's wild, unrestrained poetry was paralyzed by the thought of stepping into the spotlight. When the final chord erupted, lighting rigs flared white, then died. Lila rode the last vibration with an upward sweep of her arms, palms opening like twin suns. Applause cracked across the stadium, a galaxy of hands clapping in silence to her, though she could feel the gust of approval. Tess shouted, "Give it up for Lila Reyes, everybody!" The words appeared on her monitor in real-time captions, but Lila didn't need to read them to catch the meaning. She bowed, her dark curls spilling forward. Backstage, Tex darted around, resetting for the next number. Lila sipped lukewarm tea and cooled down her wrists with a gel pack. Fingers were athletes, her mentor had once told her. She sensed someone approach and turned to find Jonah holding 2 tiny cartons of chocolate milk. He offered one. "Your fuel of choice, right?" he signed. His hands were a little stiff, vocabulary casual, a semester of ASL years ago, brushed up on tour. "Thanks," Lila signed back, lifting her brows in gratitude. She cracked open the carton with a straw and took a long pull. The sugar soothed her nerves. Jonah's shaggy blonde hair was damp with sweat. He wore a vintage bomber jacket covered in pinned buttons that rattled faintly whenever he fidgeted, which was often. Tonight he bounced on the balls of his feet. "Crowd's wild," he signed. "You killed it." Lila smiled, tempering the flush of pleasure. Compliments from Jonah always short-circuited her calm. He was the only person whose words she wished she could hear, just once, spoken directly into her ear. Even his texting style, thoughtful punctuation, perfect metaphors, made her heart stutter. She signed, "You coming to after party?" Jonah's gaze darted to the stage entrance where Tess tuned her guitar. He hesitated, then shook his head. "Think I'll crash early. Too much energy out there." Energy, Lila knew, was code for the anxiety that clawed at his lungs whenever he imagined standing at the mic. He was safe as long as he stayed behind the velvet curtain of anonymity. The fans assumed Tess penned every lyric. The record label encouraged the illusion. A lone female frontwoman writing confessional anthems sold better. Jonah had signed the non-disclosure because he didn't want his fear becoming public property. Lila tapped his forearm. "Come to my camper after you pack up," she signed. "I have an idea." He gave a lopsided grin. Should I be nervous? Yes, she teased. He mimed a theatrical shudder before vanishing into the maze of cables. Her idea had begun at rehearsal 2 weeks earlier when she'd found Jonah white-knuckling a chair, trying to read his latest verses aloud. The stutter start of his breathing had reminded her of her own childhood speech therapist, tapping flashcards in front of her mouth, telling her to repeat after me, as if sound could sprout from vocal cords that didn't receive the correct wiring. The memory had seeded a solution. When Jonah knocked on her camper door at midnight, Lila was scrolling through her tablet, thumbnails of performance videos paused mid-gesture. A circle of candles flickered, sending shadows blooming across the walls. He ducked inside, nearly knocking his elbow on the acoustic guitar hanging from a hook. The cramped space smelled of sandalwood and lemon balm. Jonah's eyebrows rose. Seance! Layla rolled her eyes. Mood lighting. She patted the narrow bench opposite her. Sit. He obeyed, knees brushing hers. Lila set down her tablet and began signing deliberately. Your words changed my life. I want to show you how. Jonah's cheeks reddened. He tried to wave her off, but she persisted. The first time I interpreted paper wings, she continued, I realized someone out there understood what it was to be trapped inside unreachable dreams. That song kept me going through grad school when professors said a deaf interpreter was impossible. Jonah's fingers rubbed the seam of his jeans. You make my lyrics better than I do, he signed, small movements. Because I feel them, she replied. He exhaled through his nose, brow creasing. And yet, I can't say them out loud. That's why you're here, she told him. She rose, pulled a thin elastic band from her wrist, and tied back her curls. Stand up! Jonah wobbled to his feet. The ceiling brushed his head. Lila tapped his sternum gently. Close your eyes. Jonah shivered at her touch, but complied. Listen to the silence, she signed, though he couldn't see. She spoke the words, her own voice breathy from lack of practice. Sound to her felt like sculpting clay underwater. She could shape it, but never be sure of its contours. Still, the vibrations reached Jonah's skin through her fingers, resting against his heart. Lila stepped aside and signed. You wrote a poem today, right? Recite it, but without speaking, only in your mind. Let your body do the talking. Jonah's eyelids fluttered, then stilled. His hands opened uncertainly, before closing again. I don't know ASL. Don't need it, she signed. She guided his arms upward. Feel the rhythm. Trust impulse. I'll mirror you. Jonah inhaled raggedly and began to move. At first, his gestures were hesitant, almost pantomime of someone drowning. Layla matched him, adjusting angles, letting her elbows sketch the same arcs. Gradually, his motion smoothed, settling into a pattern. Fists blooming into stars, palms slicing downward like guillotines, fingers threading invisible string. Lila recognized phrases, guessed at metaphors. A chrysalis, a thunderhead, a shipwreck. She filled in grammar with facial expression, building syntax around his raw shapes. They became a duet, two silhouettes negotiating shared language in candlelight. When they finished, Jonah opened his eyes. There were tears on his lashes. I don't know. Outside myself, he whispered, voice cracking. Lila barely caught the sound, but saw the trembling of his chin. She laid her palm against it. That's performance, she signed. And you survived, he laughed, watery. Barely. Try again tomorrow, she signed. Then bold, she kissed his cheek. Jonah froze. His hand rose to the spot, stunned smile eclipsing his fear. The tour marched across continents. In every city, Jonah returned to Lila's camper for late-night improvisation. He started bringing his guitar, strumming muted chords, while she signed lyrics back at him. Sometimes he scribbled new verses on napkins, shoved them into her jacket pocket, and sprinted away, embarrassed. Sometimes they sat shoulder to shoulder, watching stand-up comedy with captions, laughing until their faces hurt. Word spread among the crew that the interpreter and the invisible songwriter were situation-shipped. Tess approved. She once told Lila that Jonah had looked one gust away from shattering before she arrived. Now he floated around sound checks, whistling off-key. But no matter how many sessions they logged, Jonah still refused to step on stage. Lila accepted his boundary, though a stubborn hope rooted itself in her chest. She pictured him under the lights, microphone in hand, fear transmuted into blaze. One rainy afternoon in Berlin, fate made its nudge. Tess came down with laryngitis 3 hours before showtime. The band's manager panicked. Tickets sold out months ago. A live stream scheduled for millions. Postponement meant lawsuits. Jonah offered to pipe Tess's guide vocals through auto-tune while she lip-synced. But the doctor warned even that might strain her cords irreparably. Lila found Jonah pacing between road cases, jacket buttons clattering. He looked at her like a man standing on a plank above shark-infested waters. "They want me to sing," he mouthed more than signed. Lila raised her hands. "You wrote the songs. You can," she signed. He shook his head violently. "My throat closes. I'll faint. They'll boo." "Let them," she signed fiercely. "But they won't, because I'll be there. We'll do it together." She pointed to her chest. "I'll interpret. They'll watch me, hear you. 2 voices, 1 song." Jonah stared, breathing quick. A stagehand shouted that the livestream team needed an answer. Tess croaked her apologies from the couch. The clock sprinted. Finally, Jonah nodded, just once, like snapping a cord. 40 minutes later, the lights dimmed inside the Max Schmeling Halle. Fans pumped fists, unaware of the substitution about to unfold. Lila stepped into her usual downstage pocket, knees soft. But instead of Tess striding to center, Jonah emerged, gripping an old brass microphone, his bomber jacket swapped for a minimalist black tee. The gas was audible even to Lila's bones. Spotlights glared. An interrogation. Jonah shielded his eyes. His jaw twitched. Lila signed to him across the stage. "Breathe. 4 counts in, 4 out." He nodded, inhaled. A gentle arpeggio from the keyboardist set the key. Jonah closed his eyes. The first lyric hovered on his tongue like a moth deciding whether to unfold its wings. Lila began, her hands painting the song's opening line. "Break me like morning breaks the dark." She emphasized break with a downward slash that rippled through her shoulders, letting the audience feel the fracture. She intentionally drew their gaze. Jonah's lips formed the words. Sound emerged, shaky but true. It wasn't Tess's acrobatic belt. It was husky, earnest, frayed at the edges like denim worn soft by years. Microphones and monitors captured it cleanly, piped it across the arena. The crowd stood stunned, collective heartbeat audible between measures. Lila saw confusion blossom into curiosity, then wonder. Fans raised glowing wristbands, bathing the scene in a bioluminescent tide. Midway through the set, Jonah nearly faltered. During Cracked Horizon, the high note loomed like a cliff. His lungs rebelled. Lila saw panic ignite in his pupils. She pivoted to face him fully, signing, "With you," repeatedly, pounding her chest. Jonah latched onto the rhythm, matching her emphatic motion with the swell of his voice. He hit the note. Imperfect, raw, a cut that bled authenticity. The audience erupted into cheers that rattled rafters. By the encore, fear had transmuted into exhilaration. Jonah prowled the stage, trading licks with the guitarist, pulling a random fan on stage to sing a chorus, while Lila doubled the vocals in brilliant sweeps. Camera zoomed in on her sparkling eyes. His flushed grin, two artists stitched together by invisible music. When the final song faded, Jonah reached for Lila's hand. He drew her to center stage. The stadium's roar surged. He signed to the crowd, clumsy but passionate, "This woman is my voice." Some fans recognized the shapes. Others inferred the meaning from subtitles on jumbotrons. Then, cheeks blazing, he signed to Lila. "And my heart!" Before she could overthink, Lila yanked him down by his shirt collar and kissed him. 50,000 people shrieked. Camera flashes splintered the air. Leila felt none of it. All she registered was Jonah's mouth curving against hers, the taste of adrenaline and salted chocolate milk. They expected backlash the next morning, tabloids claiming PR stunt, purists whining about the singer swap. Instead, hashtags exploded, praising representation. Almayer's "See the Music" trended worldwide. Clips of Lila's kinetic signing, spliced with Jonah's tremoring debut, garnered millions of views. More significant to Jonah, comment sections overflowed with stuttering confessions. Writers who feared readings, gamers terrified of voice chat, office workers who hid in restrooms during presentations. He answered as many as possible, typing until dawn. Tess regained her voice within a week, but the band's management proposed a new show format, Tess and Jonah alternating lead vocals, with Lila on stage throughout. The band rebranded as Whippoor Will Riot Loud and Clear Tour. Merchandise now featured Lila mid-sign, hair flying like ink and water. Instead of being the unheard minority, deaf fans became front-row regulars, stadiums installing side screens with close-up interpreter feeds. At soundcheck in Chicago, Lila and Jonah stood in the empty arena. He was rehearsing a new ballad. Between verses, he squinted up at the rafters and said, "Feels smaller now." Lila raised an eyebrow. "The stadium? My fear," he clarified. "It's still here," he tapped his chest. "But it's whisper-sized." She grinned. "Maybe it learned manners." He chuckled, then took her hand. "I owe that to you." "You owe me more chocolate milk," she signed. "I bought out an entire vending machine," he boasted. "Consider your debts repaid." She laughed silently, shoulders shaking. Jonah leaned down, kissing her laughing mouth. From behind the drum riser, Tess Wolfe whistled. They broke apart, mock scandalized. The guitarist yelled, "Get a green room." Lila signed, "Later," winking. Jonah flushed, but grabbed the mic. "All right, from the bridge," he told the band. He glanced at Lila. "Ready, maestro?" She saluted, then pivoted to the invisible audience, waiting for the downbeat. As the first chords rang out, she felt familiar tremors run through the stage. They no longer frightened Jonah. They no longer signaled distance to Lila. Instead, they thrummed like a shared pulse, a bilingual heartbeat stitched together by possibility. His words, her hands, one song carried on two brave fronts of silence and sound. Months later, during a rare day off in Barcelona, Jonah and Lila explored the labyrinthine alleys of the Gothic Quarter. Street performers filled plazas with flamenco guitar and accordion swells. Jonah slipped his arm around her waist and signed clumsily. "Dance with me?" Lila giggled and spun under his elbow, her skirt twirling. A little girl watching nearby tapped her mother, then mimicked Lila's flowing gestures. Lila crouched, showed the child the sign for music, one arm rocking like a conductor. The girl repeated it, eyes wide. Jonah snapped a picture, heart swelling. "Every show, more people learning," Lila signed later, over coffee that smelled like burnt sugar. "Language wants to travel," Jonah replied. "We just gave it a passport." They wandered until afternoon light slanted gold. On a graffiti-splashed wall, they stumbled on a mural. 2 silhouettes, one singing, one signing, their shadows overlapping into the shape of a wing. Someone had painted beneath, "Let all hearts be heard." Jonah traced the words, throat tight. He pulled a marker from his pocket, tour habit, and added a small infinity symbol. Lila added one too, their inks intertwining. As the sun dipped, Jonah took Lila's hands. "When this tour ends, there'll be new songs," he signed. She responded with a teasing tilt of her head. "Stage fright again?" "Some," he admitted. "But I have a secret weapon." She arched a brow. "You," he signed, then added the sign they'd created in her camper months ago, a fist opening into a star placed over the heart, their private shorthand for love born from silence. Lila squeezed his fingers. "Always." They stood there, 2 translators of emotion, beneath the painted wing. The man who found his voice in fear's shadow, and the woman who taught the world to see sound. And in the hush between street songs, they felt the same steady rhythm, a promise thrumming in 4 counts in, 4 counts out, loud and clear.